Well, Uber stumbling in its trading debut. That stock currently, you can see there, off about 1%, still trading below its IPO price of $45 per share. So joining us now is Uber seed investor and Structure Capital founding partner, Mike Walsh. Mike, I want to ask you first, as an early investor, how are you feeling about the performance today?
Hey, Zack, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm pretty happy with it. I invested along with my LPs at a $4 million pre-money valuation, so I think we're going to be okay. And as Dara has pointed out throughout the day, this is a long-term company build, so I don't think that there's any reason to get too anxious about this. And of course, the markets haven't done all that great today. It looks like it's actually tracking the Dow pretty directly.
Mike, would you say a $4 million pre-money valuation? Is that what you're saying?
I did.
Yeah, so you've got some ways to go here. I think, that's probably good. But I want to ask you first, if you can go back to when you did make that investment, if you can remember what it was like to kind of think about this decision to invest in a company that a lot of people didn't. Maybe they didn't think it was going to make it this far 10 years later since when they were invented back then. So what do you think of how far it's come and how it's no longer just positioning itself as a ride-sharing company?
Yeah, it's I was pretty fortunate, kind of the right place at the right time. When I met Ryan Graves through one of my employees at a company that I founded and was running, and he was really just looking for my advice as to whether he should take the job and move out from Chicago. A few things had been going on that made it a pretty clear decision for me. One is you couldn't get a taxi in San Francisco. You'd wait 45 minutes and they would cancel on you. So I would often take black cars from my office to my house, give them $20 and get a ride home immediately. And the other thing that happened, I was traveling lots for my company at the time, and I returned from a trip late at night. There was a huge taxi line. And I actually texted my sales rep. We were selling a community software product. And I suggested to her that she try to give the software away instead of charging licensing fees. And we do a rev share for taxi ride shares from the airport. Mm-hmm. And she didn't think that was a good idea, so we just passed on it quickly. But when I met Ryan, those two things resonated really clearly with me. Yeah. And frankly, I like Ryan a lot. So it was a pretty easy decision for me.
Right place, right time.
Mike, this is Jeanie here. I want to hear your take on the people on the ground, the drivers, and the strikes that we saw this week all across the country. As an early investor, what is your take on Uber's labor problem?
It's a great question, Jeanie. Straight up, I've been talking to executive management when I had their ear. I don't really talk with Dara at this point, but since 2010, I've been pretty firmly suggesting that they need to take care of the drivers. There are really three sets of stakeholders in this company. It's the drivers, the consumers, and the employees. And if you don't take care of all three of them, then you really don't have a business in the long run. I think, though, that there's lots of opportunity to increase the pricing. It's still 40 to 50% less expensive than a taxi. So there's lots of upside to hit profit and to put more money in the driver's pockets. And I suspect, I don't know, I don't have any inside information. As I said, I'm not that close to the company any longer. But there's a lot of room to increase pricing, hit profit, and put more cash in the driver's pockets. And then they have to figure out, the employee contractor relationship and insurance. And with the team that they've built, I'm pretty confident that they'll do that.
What do you think about the timing of the IPO? I mean, you've been in there for so long. I don't think there's anyone better to ask than yourself. Do you think Uber may have seen a more positive bounce on an initial IPO if they had done this earlier?
I don't know about earlier. I frankly don't really know the public markets that well. I'm a private company investor. They got a particularly bad week with the tariff talks and the stuff that Trump's doing. And the market in general hasn't really performed that well. So maybe, but as I heard Dara point out this morning, you just can't plan for that very well. the question whether they should have gone before Lyft or not, I personally don't think that matters too much. But again, there are people that know these public markets much better than I do.
Mike, let me ask you real quick as a last question. I know through your VC fund, you've been also investing. MoviePass was a name I saw in there. Some of these other names that continue, that might have a reputation of losing money. And when we talk about Uber and kind of the flip side, I know you say you're not a public investor, don't know much about that space, but when it comes to public investors, they tend to not have such a long time frame for getting to profitability. So in your mind, how are you looking at maybe selling your shares when you're free to trade? And also, what are your expectations for finally having to cave into that pressure to reach profitability?
Yeah, I think they'll get there. I don't know the timeline, but as I said, I think a lot of it will have to do with increasing ride prices, and there's a lot of room before consumers will go back to taxis. And as far as selling, I was a seed investor in Salesforce.com. Their market cap is about 120 billion today. Mm-hmm. My plan, frankly, is to not sell any Uber stock until the Uber market cap catches up to the Salesforce market cap.
Well, when that happens, 120, you're saying. If that happens, Dara's in for a huge payday as well. So I'm sure he wants to see that happen as well. All right, Mike Walsh, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back on as Uber continues its ride as a public company. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks. Appreciate your time.